Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for giving us this opportunity to present on this topic. So since the conference is on renewable integration, we try to see as a distribution company, what is that we can present, what is the kind of solution. So that's how we came up with this topic. Before I get into the details, okay. So this is broadly we'll be talking about. BSS Rajdhani along with its sister concern BSS Yamuna supplies to almost 2/3 of Delhi. We cover an area nearly 1,000 square kilometers, and in terms of consumers we have about 3.7 million consumers, and the peak demand we met last year is somewhere near to 2,700 megawatt in BRPL and 1,500 in BYPL. So these are some of the statistics, and these companies are part of the public-private participation that has happened. So it's a JV between the Reliance Infrastructure and then the Delhi government. Coming to the renewable integration. Okay, so this is purely from a distribution network perspective, and I just thought I'll share what has been our journey till date. So the net metering regulation came up sometime in 2014 in Delhi. So the DRC allowed net metering for all consumers, including a RESCO model. So since then, it has been primarily driven by the market and consumer interest. The role we played as a distribution company has been to facilitate the penetration. That means not create obstructions, try and see how we can facilitate, okay. But at the same time, we have to be cautious about the challenge that we will face. So that was broadly the thought process we had. And as of now, we have about 309 installations. And we already have 9 megawatt. Apart from this, we have another 12 megawatt large scale installations, and we have a pipeline of another 12 megawatt is there. And if you see in comparison with the sanction load, it's about 16% penetration. That means against the sanction load of 58 megawatt, we have about nearly 9 megawatt solar rooftop that has come in. We saw interest from all segments, so it's not driven by the tariffs. That means not just the commercial and industrial guys, but also we saw a lot of participation from residential consumers. So 50% in terms of numbers are from residential, not so much in the capacity because the capacities are smaller. So this was our journey in terms of rooftop. We all know these targets. These are some of the factors affecting rooftop solar. There is supportive policy, falling prices, facilitation, a lot of awareness is happening, reduction in electricity bill, which is a direct benefit to the consumer. And I think one of the critical benefits for rooftop solar is that there is no network expansion required. So you can directly connect and you can start producing from day zero. So broadly, these are the ones. But the challenges is there is a lot of lack of experience, a lot of new consumers, new installers, and then there is policy asymmetry across states. Dynamic rates which keep rooftop owner look for further reduction in rates. These are some of the reasons we are not seeing the kind of growth we anticipated initially, but I think it is slowly catching up. While this is happening, we try to see from various stakeholders what are the concerns and what are the improvements that can be expected. From a consumer's perspective, even after setting up a rooftop solar PV, that means you would have done a good quantum of investment, he still can't consume when required because of outages. So that's one problem. So he would want no outages and at least no blackouts is the compromise he would agree with. From a DISCOM perspective, outages means loss of revenue, fall in satisfaction of consumer, and not being able to meet the performance requirements. Similarly, a peak demand is a continuous challenge because this is continuously growing, increasing per capita income, and then the consumption are adding to this. And similarly, sometimes the low demand actually leads to underutilization of the generation, so losses because of reduced sales during that time. Finally, the technical challenges with regard to higher penetration of rooftop solar PV. If these can be solved to a certain extent, I think it will be a good idea for the DISCOM. From the prosumer, the outages, and one of the main things is loss of generation whenever there is a power outage because of the anti-islanding requirements. So he can't generate, he not only can't consume, but he also can't generate. And also sometimes there is a possibility of technical problems from DISCOM due to which it can be rejected. So these are some of the concerns of the various stakeholders. We said one of the solution could be creating a microgrid architecture within the existing distribution network. So broadly the idea is, as you can see, the On the LT side of the distribution transformer, we felt if we can bring out a solution which is a microgrid in combination with a battery energy storage system. So we are talking about storage in a big manner, and as you would have noted from the last 2 days, the storage at the grid level doesn't offer many value benefits to the system. But instead, we thought if we can place it at this particular point, the idea being the technical losses on both sides roughly being equal, and at this point, we can I would unlock many other value aspects from the system. So that was the motivation for us to look at and try and understand what are the possible benefits we can derive from. If we try to see, I mean, this is an important question that can it be done everywhere, or some kind of site selection will be required. So we try to see from a DISCOM level load curve. If you see the top curve shows not all the 365 but about 250 days load curve. So you see how the load varies. The peak, if you see, Delhi already has a double peak because of the AC load. So the afternoon 3:30 there is a peak, and night after 11 o'clock again there is a second peak, right? We tried to pick up a distribution transformer which predominantly was kind of reflecting the aggregate load curve, but also this is predominantly supplying to the domestic consumers. So the bottom one is the distribution curve, and you see some of the vertical lines, they indicate the outages. So this is one of the challenge we thought it can be addressed. Now, what are the use cases we thought? We looked at one, see, a lot of us are used to having inverter at home, right? We have a battery, we have an inverter, and some of us would know that the per unit cost of that inverter would be as high as maybe 30-40 rupees because we are using it rarely. There are losses, and there are battery losses, the inverter losses and all that. So that's, while it provides a convenience, it doesn't have any economical case. So we thought that can we create a community UPS? That means typically a distribution transformer has multiple LT feeders, and each LT feeder supplies to about 40 to 50 consumers. So we thought, can we work out a solution where a community UPS kind of scenario can be created, where all these consumers will not face outages due to upstream network failures, or even the DT substation also. That means at the LT level. So we said this is one possibility, and under this, if we kind of do a little bit of demand side management combination of excluding the heavy loads, then we can definitely supply lighting, ceiling fans, television, that means the entertainment part, and also the communication part, which is becoming more and more important. I think today you can take away everything. If you can allow the internet to happen, people are still happy. So the consumer satisfaction will still be there. So that was one of the key drivers. And we can look at ultimately a no blackout solution. That means the consumer will never really face a complete blackout kind of scenario is what we thought. That was the motivation in this. From a distribution company perspective, we can do peak load shaving. We can also achieve the capacity addition deferral. Now the capacity addition is not just a financial decision, but also sometimes a no-go situation. There are situations in which we don't have space, so you can't install a transformer, but the load is growing, the consumer is demanding, and in urban scenarios you would appreciate that consumers say, I don't want any pole, I don't want any transformer, but I want power. So how do we do it? So you have to serve the increasing loads and the varying demand patterns using the existing infrastructure. So that's one of the benefits. We thought if we can combine those benefits and use with this kind of solution, it can work out. Another challenge, this is a very interesting graph shared by a solar developer who is monitoring the generation. He showed me that, this is the curves that I get, and many of them are impacted by the grid conditions. Sometimes it is because of outages, sometimes due to the voltage variances. So the inverter generally goes out if the voltage drops below a certain point or rises above a point, so there is a loss, and for it to come back there is a time lag, so there is energy loss during that time. If we can capture that value, again that will definitely help us integrating rooftop solar in a better manner. That means the output will be better, so the value generated is also better. So these are some of the concerns of the renewable integration. So the idea is, if with the microgrid, so we can create an island, intended island, and therefore the generation would never stop, even if there is an outage. Similarly, the voltage issues also can be handled using the microgrid controller, so the inverter will face issues only within a band. So therefore the generation would always be on, so you will not be losing generation because of that, while getting the other benefits using the battery system. So what we try to do is, we try to see without battery what is a normal scenario, and with solar PV what happens, and then we add a battery but without solar PV, and then finally with all combinations. So this is the normal curve as I showed you earlier. And these are the different solar PV curves, right? So we try to model as per the actual demand. And as you can see, even with a like 50% penetration, there are very few cases where we are going reversal of power flow, right? So this is the case. In this case, the benefit will be that we can avoid the reversal of power flow also from the distribution transformer. That means power will not go to the 11 kV, it will get absorbed at the LT level. So that kind of minimizes the losses. Now, what we try to do is net load curve with battery outage, battery and peak shaving. So here the benefits, the outages, as you can see, can be eliminated using a BSS kind of system. So you can create an island, intended island, so you don't see outages. And you can also reduce the peak. So the peak we could shave up to 20%. So if it is a 1 MVA transformer, so I can reduce my peak and optimize on that, because then I can defer my capex. That means this gives me another 5 years of load growth. So that means I can defer the capex by another 5 years. Here we added the solar PV. Solar PV, as you can see, has improved and will reduce the power drawn from the battery, by the battery from the grid. It will start drawing from the solar. So that is one advantage. That means I'm not drawing for the battery, so the losses part will be taken care. So that's another curve. And then what we try to look at the economics. We try to see what are the costs and what are the benefits. But that's where we realize that the economics are not really working out as on today. But we said, okay, if these can be balanced, I think then the business case will be very, very strong. So we try to look at when we look at a solution, these are the kind of both sides we are trying to examine. From a cost perspective, the operation maintenance cost, the BSS cost, and the round trip efficiency is the one which are the cost side. Benefits are like the margin gain. That means when a distribution company sells to a consumer, there is our average power purchase cost and average billing rate. So that's the margin lost whenever there is an outage. So if I avoid outage, that margin will be realized always. Then there are certain cases where there is a grid price arbitrage. That means the grid prices are going low, and by sending a signal, you can use that power to charge the batteries. That you have a dispatchable demand. But these will be located in multiple locations, so therefore there is no network congestion on that front as well. Finally, the capex deferral. Capex deferral, more than the capex value, I think this gave us a fantastic solution in terms of no-go situations. And the advantage of using a BSS system is that I can locate it anywhere. All I need to is have a communication. That means I can locate it even at a consumer location because it's on LT side. So there is no HT, no clearance required. It's a simple box, and that will be before the meter, owned by the utility, but the consumer will get all the benefits. So we see a lot of support from the consumers for this kind of initiative. So that space issues can also be handled to a great extent. So in a kind of mature locality where the growth is not happening, so I can meet for a long period with existing capacity. So I don't need to really add the capacity. And then finally, the savings from not meeting the performance standards, because all distribution companies now, as you would know, in Delhi, the regulator has put a performance standard. If there is outage more than certain amount of time, so DISCOM is supposed to be a penalty. So we can avoid those penalties. It's not so much from the penalty perspective, but I think the consumer satisfaction will be immense, is what our belief is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we can keep some questions also for the technical content, and you have to wait a couple of minutes. So let's keep the larger discussion to the end, but I think it's helpful now directly to the presentation to have some content-wise questions if there are any. Anybody raising a question to Mr. Aram?
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to know a little bit more. What did you mention about the reverse power flow? I understand that in very high possibilities in the future, there will be a lot of penetration from small scale solar rooftop, and there might not be a possibility to avoid, rather it's more adaptability of the reverse power flow. That is my understanding. Can you please elaborate? What did you mention there?
Now, the idea is reversal of power flow means the preparedness from the distribution utility should be much higher, right? So in the current scenario, our ability, so we are, as someone presented earlier, we are now tuned towards one-way power flow, right? So it would need a distribution system operator kind of capacities. It would need a van to be in place, and I need to understand the production-related issues. So one of the primary targets of a network planner or the operator in distribution companies would be to minimize the reversal of power flows, because at a smaller scale it may not pose a major challenge, but when the magnitude increases, the preparedness will come in handy. So the idea, again, the motivation of a distribution guy is to minimize new uncertainties. You're right, the preparedness is what is required.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment on that because, well, maybe you have seen some of the presentations where how big the reverse power flow actually in Germany is in distribution grids. So also at the beginning there were fears about how that could work. But I think until you reach these values, I hope you don't need to install a battery actually to prevent it, but you have solved it just technological-wise that you don't have any fears to do it, because electrical-wise, if the current flow is positive or negative, it's just irrelevant, let's say. Any further question? Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Myself, Sivaraman. Yes, sir. You are talked about that community storage. How you will work this cost model, sir? Because that distribution system have multiple customers. So a single storage. So how you will work for the cost tariff? Thank you.
I think very interesting question, because a lot of good ideas don't get implemented because of implementation challenges. So we thought about both the models of consumer-owned model and also utility-owned model. So there have been models where we saw a differential pricing for a reliable power. Right, in a smart grid project, it was proposed to have an additional charge, about say additional 50 paise or 5% or 10% extra tariff for that area. So it will be more of an opt-in. So it will be like a value-add service to the consumers. Obviously, we have to convince the regulator, and then the consumers will have to opt in. Even otherwise, the distribution company will have, using the other value chains, they may still be able to do generate the benefit or the return on investment. That is still possible.
Is there any initiative is already taken, or it's still in planning level only?
No, we are working on many things. And also one additional point is that in low loss areas, right, so it makes sense for the distribution company to look for this kind of opportunities. Because that way your value realized is much higher because of the tariff slab benefit.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Maybe a last question from my side before we proceed with the next presentation. So we have investigated in Germany also use cases where battery storage makes sense as an emergency power supply. And so you mentioned that also now for the outages, and so that there are penalties. So I would be curious about knowing more about that. Actually, I think I've seen some figures that your company has increased reliability significantly over the last years, and so I fear that this kind of a business model for battery storages will fade out as soon as you have reached higher levels of reliability, because you don't have sufficient outages anymore. So can you somehow explain a bit if you still see there from your perspective a business case, or?
I see what the challenge is. While it seems that we would have achieved certain equilibrium or a certain level of performance state, the expectation of EVs coming into the system will act as a disruptor. Because when the EVs come in, so you can't decide where they can come in and who will do charging at what times. Unless that side is managed, we get into a managed charging model, it will definitely impact our reliability issues, right? So even in areas where we have a stable loading, like 70% or 80% loading during the peaks, if suddenly some spikes happen, so this may still causes challenges. So therefore, even in areas where we have improved reliability, the LT side challenges will still remain. So while the network side we might have improved, but the LT side challenges will remain. The substation level challenges will remain. So at least the substation level challenges we can eliminate completely using this, is what the business case.
Okay, thanks a lot.